Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan, and this is episode number 6 of Reflected. One never expects the Kerchunk. So, today I want to talk about some things that you may run into um, on your local repeater. Um, and the more people you have on your local repeater, the more likely you are to experience this sort of phenomenon. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, if I'm honest. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Let's start with explaining what a Kerchunk is. so, a Kerchunk is someone who, is on the repeater frequency, the repeater channel, and just pushes and releases the PTT button on their radio just to see if the repeater wakes up and you get the squelch trail. And a lot of times, most hams have it set up to auto ID, and in some worst case scenarios, they have it. It's a voice IDer, and it has to then explain to you what the temperature is and the output final amplifier transmission is and the wind direction, et cetera, et cetera. And it's got to transmit its life story, which is exceedingly annoying. Voice IDers and that kind of stuff. I mean, just should not exist. They're just a massive waste of time. Um, and then they don't say anything. The Kerchunkers, they just Kerchunk it. The repeater's still there. Radio's working, and that's it. Um, I guess I don't understand that behavior. If you're going to go through all the effort to Kerchunk, you're already pushing the button. You're already there. Just say, for example, you push the button N0ZFG testing, and that's it. That's all you got to say. You're still going to hear the repeater come back to you, so you know it's working. And everybody out there knows that someone's just tested the repeater. If you just Kerchunk it, well, then maybe there's something wrong with the repeater. It's maybe it's picking up some interference or whatever, especially if it doesn't have a PL tone on the input or if it's not digital or something. So you're going to run into that a lot, especially in my area. In my area, the Kerchunking got so bad. It was absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. The Kerchunking would go on over top of other people talking. And that went on for months. Months. It was just, and then it's funny now because, looking back on it, it's just ridiculous. But, at the time, it really wasn't funny. But this Kerchunking was just like nonstop, just Kerchunk, 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 and it would go on for literal hours. It would it would do that, and oh my goodness. So what do you do in that situation? Well, if it were up to me, I guess I would have started doing direction finding, to see if you can kind of pinpoint from where this interference is coming. But also, probably at the same time, I would have either changed the PL tone on the repeater or something like that, or temporarily take it offline or whatever. First and foremost, I would have changed the PL tone, right? So like the repeaters I run have I have a web based access to them, so I can just log into them and change it and be done with it. It takes me less than 5 minutes. So, and then of course you share that change with the local club. So you can kind of weed that stuff out like that, or you can do direction finding. Direction finding is a bit of a skill though, and you got to put some time and effort into it. Especially if you're in a city, because you can get a lot of reflections in a city off buildings and et cetera, especially depending on where the antenna is at, how high the antenna is, and whatever else. So direction finding can be a real skill, and unfortunately, due to the nature of a Kerchunk, it's a very short transmission, so you have a very short amount of time to get an accurate heading. There's some digital, there's some electronics, more automated solutions for direction finding that will give you a heading pretty instantaneously. It has a 4 antenna array that mounts to the top of your vehicle, and that can be pretty pretty successful in tracking down this sort of thing. And then, but then what do you do once you get a fix on where the stuff is coming from? You got to go confront the guy or gal or whatever it is, assuming it's a person. It could just be interference too. You never know. I don't know. Maybe you can hear my furnaces started up in the background, but whatever. We're going to continue. So, Kerchunking. Yeah, just don't do it. Just don't do it. If you want to make sure the repeater works, just pick up your mic, push the button, and say, insert call sign here, testing, N0ZFT testing. That's all you got to do. That can be kind of a double-edged sword too, because you're going to get the odd ham on the other end that's going to come back, sounds good, or something like that, or they're going to, or whatever. Then they're going to want to strike up a conversation, and maybe you're in the middle of a troubleshooting session and you really don't have time to talk to somebody. You just want to make sure the thing worked. It can become a whole thing. But just remember, be polite. Sometimes having somebody on the other end listening to this, giving you a signal report, that could be helpful, depending on their level of expertise. My favorite is your full quiet into the repeater. Okay, well, unless you're sitting right on top of that repeater, and you're really never going to achieve full quiet. I mean, you're just not. You're always going to have some sort of, some hissing in the background and stuff like that, or someone's going to speak in hissing. Yeah, there's some minor bacon fry going on. It's like, oh my goodness. Oh, you mean hissing, right? Right? You don't mean bacon fry, you mean hissing. Anyway, I'm being a bit pedantic there. Whatever. So you're gonna get the Kerchunker. You're also going to run into people who will tie up the repeater for hours, having a conversation, right? And so they're going to be going at it for hours. They don't leave a break to see if anybody else needs to use the repeater. They're just going to keep going, and then an hour and a half into this conversation, they're going to start talking. Inevitably, okay, they're going to say this. Yeah, you're sounding pretty good. I can hear you on the input to the repeater, so you're getting out there. So basically, what they've said is they're close enough to each other to use a simplex channel, but they want to be on the repeater, so the rest of the community can hear their multi-hour conversation, right? That's just bad form. I mean, really. If you can make your conversation happen over simplex, that's what you should do. There's nothing wrong with getting on the repeater, calling the person you want to talk to, and if you discover that you're close enough to each other, through conversation, say, oh well, we can probably make this simplex. Let's switch over to 5.2 or something like that, and then you guys just go bugger off to simplex 5.2, 146.520, and carry on your conversation there. If you can't make it through simplex, that's fine. You can still use repeater. And I don't even necessarily have a problem with carrying on hour-long conversations. It's just every few minutes you should leave a pause, in your conversation. That the other person ends their statement, their sentence, or whatever. They unkey. Before you key, just wait a couple seconds. And then start talking. Just to see if someone's going to, key up and say break or something like that, or contact, or whatever the local agreement is that you say, or whatever you want to say to break into a conversation. It's not that hard. It's just being courteous to the fellow users of the radio system. Man, by and large, I think you're going to run into a lot of good behavior on the air. You're certainly going to run into some not so good behavior. You're probably going to hear some foul language and stuff like that. Oh man, 10 code. Man, if you want to start a holy war, start using 10 code on a repeater. I mean, personally, I don't have an issue with it. I am more comfortable with 10 code than I am Q code, and realistically, on a VHF repeater or a UHF repeater, or digital repeater, Q code has no place. It really doesn't. Even on HF, I can't stand Q code. I mean, it's what is it? It's 2023. We don't need Q code anymore. Just don't. Um, so that's going to trigger some people. I know it. But 10 code, I don't have a problem with 10 code. I use 10 code all the time as a first responder. It's a nationally recognized form of communication. There's nothing wrong with it. I think a lot of hams get a bit, I don't know, pretentious about that. 10 code. That's for the old Charlie Bravos. That's for the CBers or whatever. Who cares? So what? So what if the CBers use it? Most of us came from CB anyway, so it's not even like it's a big deal. So whatever. Go ahead and use your 10 code. I love 10 code. Yeah, he was taking a 10-100. Well, it's better than a 10-200. So anyway, so what can you do in these instances? If you're hearing bad operating on the air, what do you do? Unfortunately, there's not much you can do, right? Some people may choose to publicly berate them over the air. It's not really my style. Typically what I do is I just switch to a different repeater if you have that luxury. If not, put your own repeater on the air. Again, if you have the means to do so, go ahead and do it. For example, I have a P25 system on the air, which is by special access only. So, which I might point out is in the business band. So, before everybody freaks out that you can't have access only stuff on amateur radio band that's not ham radio. I don't know. It gets kind of gray there, but to each his own. So to avoid that, I just put it on the business band. It doesn't cost that much to license a frequency pair from the FCC, and then do whatever you want. So, well, I mean, not do whatever you want. You got to comply with Part 90, but whatever. It's easy and a lot less painless, I might add. Now, this is dependent upon your area, right? I mean, if you've got a fantastic ham community in your area and everyone gets along and everything just seems to float, there's no need for this kind of stuff, right? It just so happens that in my area, it's more conducive to just kind of doing your own thing, right? I mean, it is what it is. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do about it other than change the channel in most cases, which is unfortunate because if you only have the one repeater in the area, you're kind of hosed at that point. And it's unfortunate because, I've known quite a few people who have wanted to get into amateur radio, and they come over to my place and hang out for an evening and, listen to what goes on, and it kind of turns them off to it, in large cases, in large cases in my area, there's just nobody out there. You pick up the mic and say something like, N0ZFG, is anyone out there? And you get nothing. You repeat that a couple times, nothing. No one comes back to you. So, it is what it is. The other thing you run into is, especially in my area that turns hams off to this, is the poor coverage of the local ham repeaters. And it's really kind of sad because it's just lack of maintenance is all it is. I mean, there's one repeater site that's across the river from us that gets maintained, and it has fantastic coverage. There's one that's almost 50 miles away as the crow flies that gets it's well maintained, and it has phenomenal coverage. But on the flip side, we've got repeaters that are 6 miles away that you can't hear. So it's frustrating, especially when you find out that some of them are still running on tubes. Like I said, it's 2023. You shouldn't have tube-driven equipment on what I would consider, especially if you're using it for Skywarn, I would consider that somewhat mission critical, right? You shouldn't be using tube equipment in that instance. You need to be using something solid state. It's more robust. It's been proven. That you don't have to Oh man, don't get me started on disconnecting stuff during a storm. Oh boy. Uh, so anyway, yeah, there's been a lot of new hams that have been kind of turned off by the state of amateur radio in this area. Um, there's also on the flip side of it, there's also some new hams that have got into it because of the state it's in, because they want to, improve things. They want to try and add to the community. That makes me happy. It really does. I love it when we get fresh people, a fresh perspective into the hobby, and who want to change things for the better. Because when I got into it, that's what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, I was a lot younger then, a lot more naive, a lot more gung ho. We'll say I didn't want to wait for the bureaucracy and the red tape and et cetera, especially in this area, especially when you're dealing with a club, like a club owned piece of equipment. I mean, I think getting laws passed in Congress would be easier than getting something approved by a local ham club. And well, I mean, your mileage may vary. Maybe your club is very proactive and very forward thinking and embracing of the new technology and stuff like that. But there's a few out there that aren't. Like just bringing up PL tones instead of a carrier squelch. I mean, something that simple can start this ridiculous argument that just goes on and on and on about, well, you're going to exclude people who have older equipment that can't do PL tones. I'm like, who is still running equipment that can't do PL tones? Seriously. I mean, World War II has been over for quite some time. Why are we still using equipment that can't do PL tones? Like I said, it's 2023. The amount of RF noise that's floating around in the atmosphere today is unbelievable. So the idea of trying to run a repeater with no PL tone, to me, is just asinine. It really is. You're going to have so many nuisance squelch openings, and in some cases, you're going to have the squelch set so high that you're pretty much going to have to be right on top of the repeater to open it up, and that kind of stuff. So do yourself a favor, just put the PL tones on it. Yeah, you're going to exclude less than maybe 1% of the community who doesn't have modern equipment. But I mean, seriously, you can go on eBay and buy a Bofang that could do PL tones, in some cases less than $10, right? And I don't know. I don't get that argument sometimes, why the anti-PL tone or the anti-progress, or I don't know, maybe it's just the area I'm in. I'm a bit jaded, I suppose, but anyway, I mean, try not to get discouraged in these instances. I mean, you got to see things from the other point of view as well. I mean, you're dealing with a club whose members are probably more senior, we'll say. They're used to doing it their way for so long, and this is just how it's done traditionally. And in some cases, there's nothing wrong with traditional. But on the other hand, if you're going to be using things for Skywarn or races or whatever, if you're going to deem this equipment mission critical, maybe you need to upgrade it to some more up-to-date, some more modern equipment with the features that will allow you to do the more useful things. For example, setting up your repeater with, you can even do this with PL tones, right? You can set your repeater up so the voice communications happens with a PL tone, transmit and receive. But the ID of it, when the repeater goes to do the Morse ID, and it better be a Morse ID instead of a voice ID, when it goes to do the Morse ID, you can have that transmit without the PL tone. So the listeners who are using their mobiles or portables that are waiting for that PL tone don't have to listen to this ID happen. You're still FCC compliant because you're still transmitting the repeater ID. It just doesn't have the PL tone on it, so everyone doesn't have to listen to it, right? Especially if you're having an ID at like 3 to 5 words per minute, right? No one's got time for that. Especially if, like I said, if you're using it for Skywarn or races or some other emergency communication, you just don't have time to wait for a repeater to ID, especially the ridiculous voice IDers. Nobody has got time for that. So and that's just with PL tones. You can do that. I mean, once you get into digital stuff, oh man, that gets a lot more fun. You know, you can do group calls and private calls, um, and so you can use a repeater, and one portable can talk specifically to another portable, and the whole group doesn't have to hear it. But you're not also tying up the repeater, so everyone else can still use it. Oh man, it's great stuff. It really is. It makes the use of the equipment so much more seamless, so much more enjoyable. And a lot of the stuff can handle dual mode too. Like you can run a Quantar, Motorola Quantar. You can do digital and analog. So the people who still want to run the analog dinosaur stuff can still use it. Alongside the digital stuff. You set your repeater up to if it receives an analog transmission, it'll transmit in analog. If it receives digital, it'll transmit in digital. These are things you can do now with modern equipment. It really is endless once you start modernizing this stuff. And that's what it's going to take to get, some fresh perspectives into the hobby. We gotta upgrade, we gotta modernize a little bit. I'm not saying you gotta go, spend, $60,000 from Mother Moto for the latest and greatest repeater dispatch system or something like that. I'm not saying you got to spend, $500,000 on a simulcast digital trunking system. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, start buying equipment that's probably from the, mid to late 2000s, or 2010s. So I mean, because a lot of the stuff like the Quantars are really coming down in price these days. They're getting pretty long in the tooth themselves. Come to think of it. And they've got an amazing feature set. So there's no reason to be sticking to the old stuff. Unless I get it. Some people are really into that. That's what they want to do. I myself love antique shortwave radios, broadcast receivers, Philcos and the like. And, that stuff has its place too. There's nothing wrong with having an old tube-driven piece of equipment on the air for nostalgia, but I wouldn't want to put that in a situation where you need to rely on it in emergency communications, and so on. So anyway, that's kind of it, I guess. It's more of a rant, I guess, than a actual podcast episode. I guess I don't know if that was a positive and uplifting one or a negative or whatever one. I guess you can take it either way if you want. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. If not, well, I mean, that's kind of on you. I'm putting out the content I want to put out, so I mean, whatever. Anyway, this is the Reflected Podcast. You can also find me on YouTube under my YouTube channel is called Standing Wave. You can check me out there. A lot of videos on Motorola gear and programming and etc. Stuff like that. So a lot of stuff that's geared towards the new ham currently. So we're gonna see where that takes us. Anyway, thank you for joining me on this early morning rant. I hope you have a fantastic day. Get out there, make the best of it. Get on the air, make a new friend. Especially on HF, man, you can make a whole lot of new friends. Make having the rag chew great again. Seriously, it's so sad to get on HF and it's nothing but contests and parks on the air or volunteers on the air, or whatever, QSO parties, and it's like, bring back the rag chew. That's what HF is for, man. The rag chew, just hanging with your buddies on the air, having a great conversation, making new friends. That's what it's about. That's what makes amateur radio fun for me, is meeting new people on the air. So hopefully I meet you on the air someday. If you get at least your general ticket, or even if you've got your tech ticket, maybe I'll meet you on 10 meters somewhere. So, especially with this solar cycle, it's fantastic. Anyway, my name is Alan. Hope you have a great day. In 0, ZFG, out.